What's up, YouTube? Poor Man Podcast back with another video. Today's video is going to be Jordan Peterson, hookup culture, and consent. Okay, before I get into the video though, gotta do the YouTube stuff. The goal is 65,000 subscribers by July. It's a crazy goal, it's a big goal, but it's my goal. I know when I'm gonna get to my goals if you give me the HBO special. Do you know what the HBO special is? That's the Help a Brother Out special. Alright, so go on and help a brother out. Hit the like and the subscribe button for more content. I'm gonna give y'all a second to do that. Alright, let's get to the video. Jordan Peterson, hookup culture, and consent. Let's see what he got to say.
We've had relatively reliable birth control since 1960. Okay, that's not very long. And we underestimate the unbelievable technological triumph of birth control. It's the hydrogen bomb. It's the transistor. Like, it's a major league transformation in human interaction.
Right.
Women are now free from involuntary reproduction. That's never been the case in the entire history of the planet. Okay, we don't know exactly what to do about that.
That's a good point.
Okay, so the first idea in the 60s was, hell, let's party. And, you know, you could see why. It's like, what the rules for not engaging in promiscuous sexual intercourse seemed to have vanished. So we had a couple of decades of experimentation. It's like, well, how'd that go?
Not well.
Little hard on the family, I would say. That's not so good for kids. AIDS, that wasn't a plus. Could have killed us all. And it mutated, particularly to take advantage of promiscuous sex, because viruses are very tricky things. So it turns out that sex is a little bit more complicated than we thought. Well, it actually turns out that it's a lot more complicated than we think. Okay, and now it's 50, 60 years later, and we're trying to sort this out. It's like, well, when is it okay to have sex? Exactly. And when is it not okay to have sex? And what does it mean that it's okay? And what does consent mean? And the answer to that is, well, we never used to have to think these things through, because the rule was don't have sex until you get married. That was the rule. Now that isn't the rule. Okay, so what's the rule? Well, we're not having a conversation about the rule. We're waiting till someone does something that seems like it might be untoward and then mobbing them and trying to extract the rule out that way. And it's not a very effective way of doing it.
Being reactive.
You know, you want to decrease campus rape? That's easy. Get rid of alcohol. No one has that conversation. It's like, I did my PhD work on alcohol. 50% of the people who are murdered are drunk. And 50% of the people who kill them are drunk. And almost all the date rape situations are consequences of excess intoxication. But yet there's a party culture on campuses, and anything goes.
Bingo.
And you also have this strange thing, especially on the radical left, which is unbelievably paradoxical, where absolutely every form of sexual expression imaginable is 100% permissible because sex is fine, but it's so dangerous that while you're dancing with someone at a Princeton mixer, you have to ask them 2 or 3 times if it's okay for you to continue.
Bingo.
And that's actually the case, by the way. I'm not making that up. It's like,
and this is something that's so weird about that is the original feminist movement was created so that because women felt like they were used as objects. They felt like they were always just barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, you know, this and that, right? But what happened was when the feminist movement married the sexual liberation movement, they went out and pretty much showed that that's all they wanted. Okay, so the original fight was let's not be treated like objects. And then you fast forward to 2021 and women are almost out of competition probably, but women are sexually objectifying themselves. Why is the competition so fierce for women right now? Well, it's because there is no, the price of coochie has went down. All right, there's too much coochie in the market. There's too much of it in the market because of sexual liberation. So why would a man feel like he needs to practice chivalry? Why would a man feel like he needs to put a ring on it? What would incentivize a man to do those things if it's just everywhere, and they're just giving it away, especially if you look a certain way or if you have a certain amount of money. And I think one of the repercussions for this that we don't really look at a lot is potentially the segue into polygamy. Okay, when you have 90% of the women wanting only 10% of the men, and that's completely okay within our culture to have sex with men until you get to the point where you are financially stable. Some women aren't making commitments because they want to have sex with the next man that's a little bit higher up the food chain. You get where I'm going? But before birth control was created, it seemed as though people had to make better decisions with who they gave their sex to, because at any point you could become pregnant, and that was always on the table. You know what I mean? Now that seems to have been somewhat taken off the table for people that are responsible. Now that that's been taken off the table for people that are responsible, we just have people going out and pretty much flooding the market with coochie. And what that's going to do, like any other market, is the price is going to go down for it. So a man used to have to spend $100 for it because, you know, it wasn't that much of it on the market. And you felt like this was an opportunity where you might be able to get some. So you practiced chivalry, and you paid for dinner, and you took women out on dates. But now that it's all over the place, and that's okay, it's okay to sexually objectify yourself, especially if you see the guy as attractive. Well, then, no big deal. All right? I mean, no man wants to then practice any of these social standards that we used to have for men. These used to be social standards. You had to open a door. It was seen as respectful to open a door for a woman. It was seen as this or that to do certain things for women. But now women said they don't want those things, and they flooded the market with sex. So it's at a lower price right now. And then you can't complain that men aren't approaching you anymore since you flooded the market with sex. You can't complain that men don't want to take you out on dates anymore because you flooded the market with sex, and something that was seen as sacred is now practiced all the time with multiple men. Let's continue the video.
It's like, well, both of those things can't be true. Now, what's happening, I think, on the Me Too end of things and the affirmative consent end of things is the old sexual taboos are reasserting themselves. Mm-hmm. The idea that we can extract sex out from emotional intimacy, and especially emotional intimacy, I would say, psychological intimacy, maybe even from long-term relationship, I don't believe it's a tenable idea. I don't think we can do it. And a lot of what we're seeing is the backlash against that. It's like, well, I feel used. You know, because one of the things that's happening on the really radical end of the anti-sexual abuse movement is the idea that, well, if you have intercourse with someone and then you regret it the next day,
bingo,
that's evidence that it wasn't consensual. Well,
not really, though.
It is, in a sense, evidence that it wasn't consensual, because it's evidence that you didn't bloody well think it through, right? It was good for last night, but it's not good for today. It's not very wise. The question is, well, what constitutes consent? And we need to have a very serious conversation about that. Like, under what circumstances is it acceptable to give consent?
Right.
But we're not mature enough to have that conversation. We want it both ways. We want to be able to do whatever we want, with whoever we want, whenever we want, with no consequences.
Exactly.
And we want there never to be any trouble about consent. It's like, well...
And that was a huge point right there, because I see currently with the with the taboo of the R word, okay? We've made it so taboo that people will break down an emotional rant or emotional rampage even if you just mention the word in any context outside of all men do it, and every person that it is quote unquote done to had no part in that. That's a very sensitive topic even for me, because of course it's not a person's fault, but if I'm walking around the hood with my wallet out and I have $10,000, or say if I'm walking around the hood and I got $10,000 and I'm waving it up in the air, and somebody comes and hit me upside the head and take my money, people are going to go, well, you know, So maybe if you're a woman in a very vulnerable position, you don't go out and, like Jordan Peterson said, drink alcohol amongst men that you don't know that are also drinking alcohol. That may put you in a very dangerous situation. Okay, but we're not really allowed to have that conversation, and I get it. It's a very sensitive topic, and I don't really want to go down the rabbit hole of it because it is a sensitive topic, even for me to talk about. But we're not allowed to have the conversation anymore, and there is an important conversation to be had because now it's starting to be, we're blurring the lines. Now it's about if you regret it the next day, it wasn't seen as consensual. Okay, now it's if the guy and the girl were both intoxicated, it's seen as non-consensual, and the guy is at fault for that. So the lines are getting blurred because we're not allowed to have the conversation. And this is true. This is typically what happens when you pretty much not allow for free speech because a topic may be taboo. The people who are able to discuss that topic are able to take that wherever they want to take it. Does that make sense? And it's been taken to an extreme to this at this point, I believe. But let's continue the video.
No, that's not going to happen. I don't think that sex works very well outside of committed relationships. I don't think there's any evidence that it does. There's a strong proclivity across cultures for the social enforcement of long-term monogamy. And there's reasons for that.
Right. And
I think you deviate from that at your peril. So now, if you want to deviate from that, there's all sorts of reasons to do it. And I can understand why people are interested in adventure and all of that. But, my sense also as a clinician is, you only really get to try out about 5 people in your life. You have to make a decision pretty damn quick. Like between 20 and 30, there's a lot of things to get straight, and long-term mate is usually one of them. And most of the time, people should be more careful with their sexual behavior when they're young, especially when they're drunk, than they are.
Right.
And I just think it's so interesting that all of the taboo reconstruction is coming from the radical left. It's not what you'd expect at all. You'd think it'd be the damn right-wing Christians complaining about, sexual immorality. It's like, no, it's the radical lefties. You have to have signed consent before making any physical move. And then that's so what? Really? Who thought that up?
Right.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You know how awkward that would be? You're supposed to be able to do a little bit of nonverbal reading, right? I mean, that's part of romance. You ever see a movie where the 2 people who are dating exchange consent notes? Like, that doesn't happen. So it's an unrealistic solution. But I think the real solution is that despite the fact that we have reliable birth control, we're going to have to relearn what the acceptable rules of propriety are with regards to sexual relationships. One of the things I often tell my young clients is, don't do anything physically with anyone that you wouldn't talk to them about. Because if you're too damn embarrassed to talk about it, well, maybe it's a little premature in the relationship to actually do it. And then there's harm in it. There's emotional harm in it on both parties. There's the cheapening of both parties. So it's going to take us a long time to sort this out. But hopefully we can do it in a serious manner, and it won't be merely a matter of mobbing those who seem to have made an error.
Right. So. And just my final thoughts on the video really quick. Another component to this that's super important is the fact that a lot of flirting, a lot of what it means to be good at flirting for men is the ability to use innuendo to get to a sexual conclusion, it seems like. So like when we go out, say you're at a club with a woman and y'all both catch eyes, all right, it's kind of choosing signals, she's showing you that she may be interested, because if she just goes, I'm interested, that doesn't happen that the tension isn't there. A lot of it is building up the sexual tension is what we don't like to talk about. So nobody ever just goes out and say, hey, you look good, I want to have sex with you. You look good, I want to have sex with you. And then they just go and do, like, that's not how it works, if we're completely honest and if we're having a grown-up conversation. A lot of the time it's sexual innuendo and a man having to read body language in order to get to a conclusion. So it may start off with eye contact. Then he may take a risk, okay, and touch your back, your lower back, your hips, whatever it may be. Or she may take a risk and rub your arm or your back or wherever. And those are like sexual innuendos that get you to that ultimate conclusion of sex at the end of the night, potentially. Okay. And so a lot of what we're doing is kind of unconsensual, and that's what makes it amazing. Does that make sense? That's what makes it worth it. That's what makes it the most interesting, is the fact that you don't know until you take the risk and you fail or you succeed. That's a lot of what it is to build sexual tension and be good at flirting. So it's kind of interesting that if the guy isn't of your standard and he practices even the first step of that, it's seen as harassment. So if I make eye contact, or if I attempt to make eye contact with a woman, it's seen as harassment. If I go to the next step and I try to touch her hand or I try to put my arm around her, it's seen as harassment now. So it's putting men in a weird spot where we don't know really what we can do in this flirting space to go further. And so a lot of men are just dropping out, and some women aren't happy about that. Okay, some women just aren't happy about the fact that men are just not doing it anymore, because we're at risk of a lot. We're risking a lot. But I guess that's the story where we are. Hopefully we can, I don't know, do better. Till next time.